Hey there, my name is Adrian Coetzer. I am the campus pastor on the other campus in South Marietta on the Mosaic campus of Eastside. And I have been a part of the Eastside family now for about 2.5 years. My wife is actually a part of one of the founding or charter member families here at Eastside. My journey of growing in my relationship with Jesus is really something that occurred over a relatively long period of time. I was probably around 6 or 7 years old. I remember it vividly. I was getting ready for bed, and my mom came in and she read us our Bible every night. And I remember so vividly her reading the story of the crucifixion, and I was just so moved. I was clearly very emotional, and my mom spent some time explaining to me just clearly the gospel. And I remember really very vividly just accepting Jesus into my life. I know that that was the beginning of a journey that took a few years. It was not until I was in my teenage years, finishing up high school actually, that I went through a time just of intense personal faith crisis. My faith was shaken by a few events and circumstances. I came to a point where I wasn't even sure I wanted to believe in God anymore, honestly. But I tell you what, it didn't last very long. God just reminded me through people and through circumstances that even though I was doubting, He had never abandoned me. He had never forgotten about me. I just came to a point where I realized that it was silly for me to blame God for the bad things and then say that God doesn't exist. Instead, what I realized was, what if the bad things are not of God, but God can still redeem them and do good in my life? And from there, it was just a decision I made to be more engaged in the work that God was giving me, in the ministry that God was giving me. I was involved at church. I was involved on my college campus. And God just kept using people in my life to disciple me and to train me. And I quickly realized that I really had a desire in my heart for God, and that desire led me to want to share God with others. Even though I live in the States, obviously I am not from here. My accent, I think, gives it away. I'm originally from South Africa. Both my parents' side, my father and my mother, have been in South Africa for a very long time. I was born into a relatively usual Christian family. My dad was a pastor. They were serving in South Africa, but shortly after my birth, we left South Africa to go to France to learn French because my parents were getting ready to go and serve as missionaries in the Comoros. The Comoros is a small cluster of islands right off the coast of Africa before you hit Madagascar. And so we went there eventually. And my dad there pastored and built one of the only evangelical churches. We stayed there for about 4 years. And then we moved to Madagascar. We lived in Madagascar for about 9 years. You know, we'd live in a city on a coast most of the time. And we'd go on mission trips on the insides. And, you know, it's the kind of idea, if you go, you get in your car and you drive as fast as you can. It's just muddy, broken roads, potholes everywhere. When you run out of roads, you get to a river, you jump in a canoe, you load up all your equipment in a long dugout canoe, and you row upriver as far as you can. When you run out of river, you start hiking. And you'd often hike for days on these muddy trails in the jungles in the middle of nowhere. Nobody knows where you are. But it was always an adventure. It was always exciting. It was always so neat to come to these places that often never heard about Jesus, don't know what a Bible is. It was just quite an experience. But the thing is, after about 9 years there, the Lord led us away. My dad had trained and planted many, many churches, trained many pastors, and it was just time for us to leave. We went back to South Africa. I got to just experience life in South Africa for a couple of years, mostly in high school, and then we left again. And we went to France. And there my parents have served now for almost 20 years. I got to finish high school in France. I did college in the University of Paris in France. And I was getting ready, just preparing myself to enter the ministry myself, not as a pastor, not in church work, but in parachurch work. And so, you know, I've always wanted to be of the attitude that I don't want to just do it because my dad does it. I always want to be involved in church and always will be involved in ministry, but I didn't want to just follow my dad's footsteps because, well, that's what I knew and that's the example that had been set for me, as good an example as it is. And so for a long time, I was just avoiding it. I was just doing all kinds of other things. In college, I studied humanities. I studied literature and history. I love those topics and those subjects. That's really a passion of mine. And I wanted to leverage that for ministry. I wanted to be a teacher in a foreign country using these skills to teach people and then show them the love of Christ. And for a long time, I just ran away. I just wanted to avoid the topic, to be frank with you. It was not until after I got married and I went through a really tough season of just not figuring out what God wanted me to do that finally I just gave in one day and I said, okay, fine, I'll find a seminary and I'll start. At the very least, I'll get some more education and maybe that will be used in ministry. Within a few weeks, God had made it clear to me that that was the calling on my life, that He had spent my whole life training me for this calling so that I'd be able to serve and to minister to communities and to congregations with the experience He's given me. And as I went, God just kept opening one door after the next, and I've had the immense privilege to serve in some fantastic churches. I love the church, and it took a lifetime for me to realize that God had been teaching me to not just love ministry, but to love the church, because the church is a beautiful thing. The church is the bride of Christ, and she deserves to be loved as such. So many of us like to think about our lives as being a journey. And that's true. They say life is not about the destination, it's about the journey. And the thing I've realized through the years is the journey is great, but if you see your journey as an adventure where you expect the unexpected, where you expect God to do some amazing things and to just surprise you, to show you how sovereign He is and how good He is and how gracious He is, I think it's a much healthier perspective on life. We just don't take life as it comes. Instead we take life that God gives us, and we are rejoicing in all the good things, but we also realize that sometimes in the harder things of life, God is still equipping and training us. The other day we sat down with Jennifer, my wife, to count how many times I've moved and how many schools I went to, and honestly, it was hard to count. Between elementary school and high school, I think we count somewhere around 8 or 9 schools. That's a lot of change for a child. There's a lot of new friends. Often these are in different countries and different school systems, different languages. But looking back, I realized how God used all of that to really equip me and train me. And the work I do now here in South Cobb County, where we see the nations in our background, we literally hear people sing, and we go on international mission trips in Cobb County. That's exciting to me. And to be able to just look back and see how God used a lifetime worth of experience, worth of adventure, it's just so neat. It's just so powerful, because now you can look at the future. And in these crazy times, in this chaotic time, we don't really know what the future holds. I think most of us will agree that we don't even know what the next few weeks will hold. But what we know when we have a healthy perspective on our walk with God is that it's going to be an adventure. And I look forward to the future. I look forward to what God is doing. I know it's not always going to be easy, but it's still going to be really good because it's God's way. And that is my story. I just want to embrace the adventure that life is with God. Mon nom est Adrian Coetzer, et ceci est mon histoire. Mijn naam is Adrian Coetzer, en dit is mijn story. My name is Adrian Coetzer, and this is my story.